Tonight on First Tuesday.
These children are presently being neglected by, yes, by their communities perhaps, yes, by their parents, yes, by their governments, yes, by their societies, but by us too.
The forgotten children of Mexico. Thousands of children used and abused, surviving on city streets. And a sentimental journey for hundreds of wartime mothers and babies born in Scottish stately splendour.
Oh,
I bet you didn't know about this when you were
you're quite pleased to see where you were born. Not the actual bed, of course.
Good evening. It's the first Tuesday in September, and we've got two films for you. One about wartime babies born in the grand surroundings of a Scottish stately home. But our first film is about children with a less happy start in life. The children who survive by whatever means they can on the city streets of Mexico. The experts estimate that 100 million children now live and work on city streets worldwide. In Mexico, a sudden fall in oil prices and the world's second biggest national debt have made the problem worse. We visited the border town of Tijuana and Mexico City to learn what life is like for street kids.
Vengan por él, se está muriendo.
The exercise yard of a Mexican juvenile prison. Most of these prisoners are not criminals, but victims. They are homeless children, children abandoned by their parents, and vagrant street children, sentenced indefinitely until they can prove their identity or are claimed by relatives. Such reunions are rare, for most have been dumped on the wrong side of an international borderline which defines the end of the poor world and the start of the rich. The border between Mexico and the United States of America. Zapata Canyon. The stage for the biggest illegal migration in the world. So uncontrollable that the departure point is already on United States soil. The Californian sheriff's helicopter is no deterrent to men like Joaquin.
I feel sad because I leave my wife, my children in Mexico, you know. Now I chose, I had to cross the line. I had to go to the United States. Why? Because I had to make money. Collect fruits, apples, cherries. When I go to picking cherries, I'm making 120 baht a day.
The night crossing has an established ritual. A final meal, warm clothes, and running shoes on sale. The Border Patrol changes guard at sunset, and the procession begins. First off are decoys, paid to distract and get caught. Up to 500 migrants cross the Zapata Canyon every night. Some 3 million Mexicans try to enter the United States illegally every year. 2 million make it. If the children get caught, they face family separation. Most are left behind. Joaquin is leaving behind his children and his country, possibly forever. The flight from poverty begins in the countryside. At Canoa, 1,500 miles south of the border, the land is dry and over-farmed. It can no longer support the families who have lived off it for centuries. Pascual Perez has a family of 7 to feed. He owns 2 hectares, which take just 2 days to sow with maize. He can't afford fertilizers to improve his yield. It's a family crisis.
Entonces, por lo mismo, pues no hay mucha producción de maíz, frijol.
There isn't much of a crop of corn here. There isn't a capacity to sow the land, to produce more. The land is dry. If it rains, we get a crop. But if it doesn't, there is no crop. What will happen? If there is nothing, no help, then we will die. There would be no alternative.
Every morning, Pascual joins a telling exodus from his village.
No tenemos trabajo.
We have no work. We don't know what is going to happen.
The early bus from Canoa to the provincial capital of Puebla discharges Pascual and 30 able-bodied men from his village. They disperse for day labor hiring queues on the street corners. Not even the lowest paid work is available today. Pascual's boys have no secondary school to go to and are already working for the household. They have no qualifications and no prospects in a blighted rural community. Pascual is thinking of moving his family to Mexico City. Pascual is why Mexico's capital is the fastest growing city on Earth. Today, it has more than 20 million inhabitants. The projection, 35 million by the end of the century. Its numbers are swollen every day by 1,500 people who arrive from the countryside looking for work and a new life. The hiring queues start at the bus station. It's the same story as at Puebla, only here the queues are bigger. Only 50% of Mexicans enjoy full-time employment. New arrivals, ill-equipped for city work, soon send their children onto the streets. They sell chewing gum and wash windscreens at the traffic lights. The reward for poisoning your lungs as a flamethrower is between £5 and £10 a week in tips.
However shocking it may appear to you, we estimate that in the world today there are approximately 100 million of these children working and some of them living on city streets. That's half the population of the United States. It's greater than the population of most countries in our world. It's a very large family. Of that family of 100 million children, roughly the majority are between the ages of 7 and 14, 15 years of age. What you see when the child comes to wipe off your windscreen is a child who is a wage earner for his family. The reasons in developing countries for street children being on the street are principally economic. They have to be there, they have to earn money, they have to take a quota home, or they are more of a liability than an asset to their families. But what is going on all over the world at this point in time is going on in capital letters in Mexico.
Walter is 12. He's been selling chewing gum on the streets for 3 years.
I buy the carton at the sweet shop for 40 pence and make 80 pence on each carton because I sell each little pack for 10 pence. Sometimes I buy 5 cartons and make 4 pounds. I give the money I earn to my family to buy food and to have something to eat when I go home, and to buy clothes and shoes. It's not easy because sometimes there aren't many sales. Other times it's okay. Some people even give tips. When I say it's not easy to sell chewing gum, I mean when the police patrol is about. The patrol goes around beating us up. Without this, what would happen is that we all wouldn't eat. We wouldn't have shoes. We wouldn't live as we do. We would already be dead from hunger.
After 60 years of supposed socialist revolution, Mexico remains split between rich and poor. The one great hope was oil. The country's biggest export and dollar spinner was to hoist Mexico out of the third world. But oil prices slumped by 20%. Mexico became the world's second biggest foreign debtor, followed by a new wave of unemployment, urban migration, and poverty.
Mexico is the Latin American example of this decade of a success story and of a tragedy. This is an economic crisis country. The bottom has fallen out of the oil industry. The dreams of the Mexican government of a success story have gone awry. The economy is in shambles. The Mexican peso, which was once worth 12 to the dollar, is now almost 1,200 to the dollar. What Mexico is going through and what Mexican street children are going through is a direct result of a world economic order which is unjust and which must change, just the same as we can draw a line from the country to the city and to city streets to show the chain of events for street children. We can also draw a line of events and a chain to show what happens between the car that's sitting in your garage and the children who are out working on city streets here in this country. There is a direct connection, even if we are not particularly pleased to admit it.
Nowhere is that connection more vivid than at the official border between the United States and Mexico, the world's busiest international crossing point. On the Mexican side, the magnet is Tijuana. Tijuana is a tourist city. 35 million visitors a year are drawn by its cheapness in everything from divorce to tequila.
Well, in Tijuana, one sees the collision of two worlds, the haves and the have-nots. The people who are able to exploit and the people who are nothing more than the victims to be exploited. Not always intentional and not always knowing, to be fair to both sides, because very often to both sides it's just business.
Okay? Not yet.
At night, the children are still on the streets, still chasing the tourist dollar.
No, I don't want a tip.
What you see in Tijuana is the physical reality of a rich 20% and a poor 80% of the world using each other.
Where's a good place to eat?
A city like Tijuana ought to be of international concern to all of us. It's a tragedy what's happening to kids in that city. The large number of the kids who are out there making it for their families and for their own survival. Those youngsters are our target group, our principal concern, because they're at very high risk.
The risk is that they will leave home for good and live full-time on the street. No one knows how many children live on the streets of Mexico. In the capital, the estimate is 10,000.
La popotitos.
They live nomadically, usually in gangs. Survival is by stealing, scavenging, and begging. They are scarcely acknowledged by their government, except when police vans round them up in periodic raids.
The most common feeling that a street child has is a feeling of rejection, a feeling of being, as they call it, marginalized, pushed off the page, a feeling of being second class, a feeling of being not worth it.
Glue sniffing is routine. Activo shoe cement blots out reality and hunger for 10p a bottle. Run-ins with the police are another everyday hazard. This time, Fernando and Adolfo escape with a warning.
We start running away, but then they catch up with us and grab us and put us in the van. And they take us in the van to Cuauhtémoc police station. And they keep us there. It depends. If they just pick us up for vagrancy, we're in there for 12 hours. If we steal something, or something like that, then sometimes they send us to court.
Adolfo is 12. He's been on the streets for 3 years.
I ran away because I had no father. We were living with my granddad. Then my uncle and aunt came and started to knock me about, and that was when I left.
Fernando, at 13, has been on the streets for 4 years.
Es que yo me salí de la casa porque perdí
I
a mi
ran away
mamá.
from home because I lost my mother. She died in a crash. I was working then, and my father went to live with another woman.
O sea, se juntó con otra mujer. Yo no
I never heard from him again.
me vine para el DF.
I came to the capital, and I've been living in the streets ever since.
La camioneta de protección social.
I got picked up by the police patrol van, but I ran away one day, and they haven't caught me yet.
No, yo no me siento bien. ¿Sabes qué?
It doesn't feel good. I get bored a lot, but I have nowhere to stay, only the street.
Yo en la mañana.
In the morning, when I have no money, I don't have any breakfast. But I know a chap there in Chapultepec who is a PE teacher. He gives me money.
O sea, me dijo que si me quiere.
He asked me whether he could take some pictures. You know, in the nude. The human body. They wanted to do a study. His cousins are doctors, and they needed photos of the human body.
Y, o sea, necesitaban esas fotos del cuerpo humano. No, yo me sentí nerviosa, pero.
I was very nervous, but he gave me 30 pence for each photograph, and a pair of trousers, and a shirt, and a pullover.
Un pantalón y una camisa y un suéter. O sea, a mí me gusta por, o sea.
I'd like to study. I'd like to get somewhere in life, but unfortunately, I don't have the chance.
Desgraciadamente, pues ya no tengo la oportunidad.
I'm not happy in the streets. I'm sad. Not having a family makes me feel very sad.
Al no tener mi familia, pues me siento muy triste.
Pido a veces, ahí pido en los mercados o.
I beg in the markets or there in the underground exits.
Es que está mal y nos humillan.
It's bad. They humiliate us. They call us things like junkie, glue sniffer, pickpocket, things like that.
Ratero, y así cosas. Pues quién sabe, según lo que.
I don't know what will happen. Maybe I'll get run over by a car.
Carros, así.
But prophetic in the sense that, well, what will happen to our societies if we don't help them? In other words, what's the cost of not helping them? It's even more terrifying when you consider that each of them potentially is a father or a mother of God knows how many more street children in the next generation. And then we're surprised that the sort of things that these children do indicate their lack of concern for life. We have given them their lack of concern for life. That is to say that if you feel worthless in your world, then what do you have to lose by becoming involved in theft or in prostitution, by doing things that we consider to be illegal and immoral? Many children can sense adults who hate them, who don't just feel that they're worthless, but feel that they're dangerous, that they're a threat to the part of society that they represent. None of us chooses to be born. But street children are often blamed for being street children. And almost always the choice is never theirs. It's a choice forced upon them.
Mexico's problem of street children hopelessly outweighs the solutions. There is a small network of refuges like Father Chinchachomas, funded by charity and dedicated to rescuing street children. They are voluntary and free, providing basic food and shelter and a first sense of family for children invariably scarred by domestic breakup and violence. At 14, Jorge is in his first week of shelter after 8 years on the street.
My father used to hit me a lot, and my mother used to fight with my father. So I decided to leave to put a stop to all that. That way, my mother and father would not have to fight anymore. We were sleeping in the street when a police van pulled up. They grabbed my brother by the hair and they caught me. They got us into the van. The policeman beat him up. They made him bleed. To tell you the truth, they nearly killed him. I feel sad when I remember what I went through on the streets. The cold, the hunger, I don't know. There are times when I don't even feel like having a bath because I've always lived in rubbish dumps.
Father Chinchachoma also runs a fledgling school. For the street children, it's usually the first education of their lives. Lessons run from sex education to basic literacy.
Yo creo que fundamentalmente les ha hecho falta amor.
Basically, they're in need of love. A child has to identify with someone who cares for him, or he goes through life as a worthless human being. I tell them, you are diamonds. Despised, covered in dung, but diamonds. They've lacked education. They've had to start earning when they were too young. They have taken responsibilities well above their abilities. They need to be children to play because they have never played enough. The number of children in the street is increasing at a frightening rate throughout the world. It is the mark of a corrupt, materialistic civilization in which the human being has the least value. Parents should have warmth for their children. A child is more important than the status of anyone.
Es más importante un hijo que el estatuto social de cada persona.
Very few of these children grow up without being abused and exploited physically, sexually. But often it is just survival. I put it to you that very few little girls or little boys are looking for 45-year-old men voluntarily. In other words, what we're talking about is sexual exploitation, not child prostitution.
Laura and Perla both lived on the streets before they were in their teens.
Sometimes I used to go to the lorry parks. Other times, wherever there were Indians, I would sleep amongst them. Until one day, a bad thing happened when a man lied to me. He said if I went with him, I could have everything I wanted. I was going to look after his grandchildren. And I believed him. I went with him, and we were in bed, and he beat me up, and I lost consciousness. I fainted. The next day, I went back to the other children.
Yo me sentía en la calle, me sentía muy sola porque...
In the streets, I felt very lonely because when I lived on the streets, when my mother threw me onto the streets, they saw I could manage all right. I did everything. I sang in the buses, I sold sweets, I worked as a prostitute. I fed my brothers when they realized I could manage.
10 p.m. Children are still working the streets of the capital.
We're probably not depriving them of too much. They'll go on living, or they'll go on existing. What we're depriving them of is love, and really being alive, the chance to really enjoy being on this planet.
Activo.
1 a.m., the glue sniffers of Garibaldi Square.
Ay, que cómo le echas así, Racha.
Ay, pues le echo así. Así. Y ya.
Todos los días.
Lo uso para limpiar zapatos, para monear. Pero o sea, para activar, señorita. Activar, o sea... O sea, en cementarse. O sea, inventarse, o sea...
Me endrogo y...
A mí me pasa algo como si estuviera yo en las nubes. Pero no estoy. Estoy en la tierra.
¿En la tierra? Sí, así es.
¿A ti?
Pues yo siento, por ejemplo, yo siento vibraciones. Cuando estoy bien pasado, pues estoy siento vibraciones de ver emociones. Y en ese tiempo ya tengo muchas cosas.
Y no tengo quien responda por mí y por eso hacen lo que quieren aquí en México.
These children are presently being neglected by, yes, by their communities perhaps, yes, by their parents, yes, by their governments, yes, by their societies, but by us too. And it's easier for us because just like the television set, we can change channels or we can turn the thing off. But I maintain that we have no moral right to do that. The hunger, the physical hunger, the temptation and the lure of drugs to cure that hunger and keep out the cold and so forth. If you can survive all of those things along with the loneliness and the violence that you face every day, then you have to be strong. And if you can be that deprived and make it, then you have something very special.
When I've got money, I don't worry, because I know I can pay for a dormitory and sleep there. But when I don't, I'm ready from about 8 o'clock, ready for the police patrol, to run away or hide so they won't get me. When it's very cold, I look for corners in the houses, ones which are unoccupied. There are always some empty rooms. Then I'm hardly ever cold, but I am cold sometimes.
2 a.m. Adolfo has found shelter in a derelict house.
Bueno, pues yo cuando tengo dinero, pues me quedo.
When I have no money, I stay in the streets, or I stay by Chapultepec Park with the other children.
Por el bosque de Chapultepec con otros niños. O sea, pues ahí tenemos cobijas.
We have things to cover ourselves with. There's a place with stairs at the back we can climb where we keep the coverings. There are 15 of us, and we cover ourselves up.
Chavos, con eso nos tapamos. Pero pues, o sea, como estamos en unas parrillas del metro.
We lie on the underground gratings, as it's quite warm. Hot air comes out, and we sleep there until dawn.
Ahí nos dormimos hasta que amanece.
UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is launching World Children's Week later this month, and the money raised will go towards schemes for street children in Mexico and in Khartoum. After the break, we visit one of the stately homes of Scotland.